Let's talk about two of the biggest, most spectacular flameouts in all of literature, Shakespeare's Macbeth and Marlowe's Dr. Faustus. We're going to dive into how a legendary warrior and a genius scholar, guys who basically had it all, ended up orchestrating their own complete and utter self-destruction. It's a fascinating look at how greatness can crumble from the inside out.
And really, that's the question that keeps these plays so powerful, right? How does this happen? You have a national hero on one side and a man who's mastered all of human knowledge on the other. I mean, these are titans. So what is that fatal flaw, that tiny crack in their foundation that brings the whole thing crashing down? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at who these men were before everything went wrong. Then, we'll dig into their specific ambitions, what they were really hungry for. We'll examine the supernatural forces they tangled with, map out their psychological freefall, and finally, we'll see why their stories are both considered the ultimate tragedies of wasted potential.
So, let's set the stage. First, you've got Macbeth. He's this celebrated general, a hero fresh off the battlefield, the guy the king absolutely loves. And on the other side, there's Dr. Faustus. He's the ultimate Renaissance man, a scholar who has totally mastered medicine, law, logic, theology, you name it. They're both at the absolute peak of their worlds.
Now, both of these men are driven by a powerful ambition, but, and this is key, it's the kind of ambition that really defines their downfall. See, Macbeth wants to conquer the world of men. Faustus, he wants to become a god and leave the world behind. And that one difference sends them down two very different but equally tragic paths.
Macbeth's ambition is just raw. And what's so incredible is that he is completely aware of it. He says it right here. He admits he has no good reason, no noble cause to do what he's thinking of doing. It's just pure, uncut, vaulting ambition for the crown. He knows from the jump that this is his fatal flaw.
Faustus is a whole different story. His ambition isn't for a kingdom on earth, it's for divinity itself. This one line reveals his massive intellectual pride, a kind of hubris that was, a big theme of the Renaissance. He's not content with just knowing things. He wants godlike power to control reality itself.
So putting them side by side like this makes it crystal clear. Macbeth wants to be the most powerful man in the world. Faustus wants to be more powerful than the world. One is a political ambition, the other is metaphysical. But trust me, both of them come with the exact same price tag, their soul.
So how do they go about chasing these wild dreams? Well, both of them turn to the supernatural for a little help. But here's the brilliant twist. The very forces they think they're using as tools are actually using them. They think they're in control, but they're really just puppets in a much bigger game.
For Macbeth, the trap is made of words. The witches use this technique called equivocation. It's not straight-up lying. It's about telling half-truths, using tricky language that makes you feel safe and confident, when in reality, that very language is sealing your doom. And this table really breaks down the mechanics of their manipulation. For Macbeth, the deception is all verbal. The witches give him prophecies, like the famous "none of woman born" line, that make him feel untouchable. For Faustus, the deception is much more visual. Mephastophilis keeps him distracted with all this flashy but totally hollow magic, conjuring Helen of Troy, playing pranks. The end result is the same. The power they think they have is a complete and total illusion. Okay, so they've made their Faustian bargains, so to speak. What happens next? What goes on inside their heads? This is where we trace their journey down, from these great men into, well, something broken and empty.
Macbeth's downfall is like a chain reaction. The ambitious thought leads to murder, which immediately brings on overwhelming guilt and paranoia. That fear then pushes him to commit more and more violence just to hold on to his power. And this brutal cycle of bloodshed just numbs him. It hollows him out until he gets to that famous tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow speech where life itself is just meaningless noise. It's a total existential collapse.
Faustus's collapse is different. It's less about a violent spiral and more about just a pathetic waste of potential. I mean, think about it. He sells his soul for ultimate power. And what does he do with it? He plays pranks and chases cheap thrills. His entire journey is from this peak of intellectual pride to the absolute pit of spiritual despair, where he's convinced he's too far gone to be saved.
And of course, they don't get there alone. Their paths are shaped by these crucial side characters. You have Lady Macbeth, who literally tells her husband to hide his evil intentions to be the serpent. And then, in total contrast, you have the old man, who shows up and gives Faustus one last beautiful chance to repent. One character embraces the push into darkness, the other tragically rejects the hand reaching out to save him.
This, right here, is Macbeth's point of no return. He's waded so deep into a river of blood that turning back seems just as pointless and difficult as pushing forward. It's not about right or wrong anymore. It's just a grim, practical decision. And he decides to keep going.
And here is the equivalent moment for Faustus. Now, the tragedy here is that it's not that God won't save him, it's that Faustus believes he can't be saved. His pride has morphed into this profound despair. He has rationalized himself into damnation, choosing to believe he's beyond saving instead of asking for mercy.
So in the end, both plays are about this incredible sense of loss. It's not just about death. It's about the complete squandering of what could have been. And that brings us to a really famous idea that perfectly explains why these stories hit so hard.
The famous critic A.C. Bradley put it this way, and honestly, it's the perfect lens for these two. Macbeth wastes his courage and nobility on a bloody, paranoid reign. Faustus wastes his god-tier intellect and his immortal soul on, well, on parlor tricks. Both men had this immense capacity for greatness, and both of them just threw it all away.
And here it is, the ultimate cheat sheet. If you're studying for an exam, this is your slide. You can see their tragic arcs laid out right next to each other. Macbeth's ambition leads him to paranoia and the final realization that the witches played him. Faustus's pride leads him to despair and the horrifying knowledge that his 24 years of fun cost him everything. Both end in total ruin. One is dismissed as a dead butcher, and the other is literally dragged screaming to hell.
And this, I think, is the most powerful distinction. At the end of his story, Macbeth feels nothing. Life is just noise and nonsense. His tragedy is emptiness, but for Faustus, his tragedy is the exact opposite. It's the arrival of the most intense feeling imaginable, pure, absolute, eternal terror as the clock strikes midnight and the devils arrive.
So, I'll leave you with a question to think about. Which fall is greater? The man who destroys a nation for a power he can never truly enjoy, or the man who sells his soul for a power he never really uses? Is it worse to be ruined by ambition or ruined by despair? Something to chew on. Thanks for tuning in.